Hello, friends. I wanted to talk to you about immigration. I think it's an appropriate topic for midnight on a Wednesday night. I wanted to suggest that it was there was somebody I think on the radio that was talking about doing the Lord's work and and all of that, and we need immigration reform. I actually view the word reform as a word of tolerance, something that really undermines American exceptionalism and the abandonment of common sense, because common sense is a huge part of how we used to function in this country, and we seem to not have any part of that anymore. Are illegal immigrants entitled to anything when they come to this country? I would submit that absolutely they are not. We are not entitled to anything in this country, at least constitutionally we're not, other than entitled to the fact that we pay our tax dollars and receive certain benefits from the government. And I don't mean socialism, I mean those few and defined powers through the protection of the national security, the aid of foreign commerce, not the restriction of foreign commerce, and the engagement in foreign affairs, limited as defined by the Constitution. And I think a lot of the problem is the fact that we don't understand, or we don't really have time in all of our busy lives to be able to read all of the laws that they pass, with or without our knowledge. And then, of course, some of the historical things that have been written some time ago. One of them is you'll find the immigration laws in Title 8 U.S.C. Chapter 12 of the United States Code. And within that provision, there was something called the Walter McCarran Act of 1946, which is an interesting read. And there's a provision in there, and I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I think I can pretty well tell you what it includes. And basically, it outlined the naturalization laws from the Constitution, and the fact that that was what the federal government had the authority to do. And when they did that, they outlined a provision stating that nationalization would take 7 years. And basically, the reason for that is for the particular immigrant to assimilate into our culture by the time that they actually became a citizen. Part of those requirements was to be able to learn to read, write, speak, and understand the English language. It was to understand our form of government. It was to abandon any foreign allegiance to any form of government or dictatorship. It was to, you could not be a person, you could not be a criminal, you could not be a drunkard, you could not be an adulterer at that time. And you also had to have witnesses to that fact. So that's a very interesting act. It's called the Walter McCarran Act of 1946. And I think a lot of us are trying to, with all of the things that are overwhelming the system, a lot of us really don't know what the root cause of the issue is, so we just try to fight what we know. And I think the immigrants coming into this country that obviously believe differently than we do is a definite cause for concern. But I don't believe that it really strikes at the root cause of the issue. I believe the root cause of the issue is not really having a proper understanding of the conspiracy that relates to the creation of the United Nations, the global, the conspiracy behind the global government and the move toward a global government through the abolition of the borders, the creation of the European Union, the adherence for our own national Supreme Court to adhere to international law, the establishment of Common Core as a global standard, the Agenda 21 as an environmental standard through the G20, and the creation of Agenda 21 through the Rio de Janeiro Conference in 1992, and some of those issues. And so I really came up with something that I thought would, would definitely be something to think about. We continue to, what I believe is we continue to fund our own enslavement. The taxpayers believe that we're actually paying for government's existence, and that's actually not the case. Or I would submit that that's not the case, because with the information that I have thus far would lead us to believe that we are only paying off part of the debt, a small part of that debt. The IMF and the and the Federal Reserve are the ones that are actually funding our government's existence right now, from what I've read. So, you know, the other thing that we had talked about is, you know, there have been mentioned several times about, you know, withholding taxes from the government to prevent them from funding these issues. But it would be difficult to do if we understood that we weren't actually funding them. There was actually a controlling entity that was actually funding that, which I believe to be the Federal Reserve and the IMF and Soros and the rest of those guys. But, you know, it definitely would make a public statement if we had 300 million people that all of a sudden decided that, you know, they weren't gonna pay taxes. It'd be interesting to see how that works out. Now, I'm not advocating not paying taxes, but what I did want to share with you is some information that I just found out. You know, back in the Ron Paul days and all of that, and, you know, of course, I think the organizations had talked about the Federal Reserve has never been federal. It's never been a reserve. It's a private agency that it was created to be able to manipulate our currency. What they also don't know is that the IRS, from what I've read, was actually a creation of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, in order to fleece the wealth of the American people back to the British Crown. We actually have several laws that actually talk about that, but one idea before I say that to consider is it lawful for us to be able to have the collection of public funds by non-public officials? Is it okay for Burger King to show up at your door and say, hey, you owe me, you know, $1 million? I don't think so. You know, that would be something that we would entrust our public officials to be able to do, and therefore the IRS does not qualify for that because it's considered a non-public, non-governmental agency. If we do submit to a private agency that does collect funds, that may be considered in the legal field as being guilty of imposing fraud and embezzlement upon the people. So basically, there are. No, I should pull those out for you. There's a Supreme Court case called Diversified Metals versus the IRS that basically clarifies the fact that the IRS is not a government. It's actually part of the International Monetary Fund way back then. There's also Public Law 102-391 that says that the IRS is not government. There's also Public Law 94-564 that says they're not government, and then there's a Senate Report 94-1148 on page 5967, allegedly, that also alludes to that fact, in addition to Public Law 102-391 that I've already mentioned. So if these public laws are in effect, and we have a Supreme Court case, you know, we all believe the Supreme Court's the supreme law of the land now. If that's actually true, and the IRS is not a government official, and it is in fact true that no non-government official can collect public funds, or they could be guilty of fraud and embezzlement, exactly why is it that we're paying taxes? And so again, I'm not advocating not paying taxes. That's not one of the hills I want to die on right now. I think we've got some bigger fish to fry, but I definitely think it's worth some consideration. So I thought I'd share with you guys what I know. Do your research. Don't trust what I tell you, but I'm just here to offer some perspective. So anyway, give me your thoughts as always. I'm always open for it. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.